Wednesday, April the 10th, 1912. From Ocean Dock in Southampton, the liner Titanic set sail on her maiden voyage to America. It was to be the start of a legend. Just under 5 days later, the mighty, unsinkable vessel stood on her beam ends and plunged beneath the surface of the Atlantic. She took with her 1,503 victims. It was the end of a great dream. She was designed as one of the White Star Line's big three to compete against the Cunadas already racing across the Atlantic at new record speeds, the Mauretania and the Lusitania. Titanic was a sister to the Olympic, who'd made her maiden voyage the year before. In Titanic, the White Star chairman, Bruce Ismay, planned to send unheard-of luxury to sea, and yet have spaces available for the emigrants who were hurrying to the shores of the New World. She was divided into 15 watertight compartments, and she was designed to float with any two of them flooded. On board her for this first voyage with Bruce Ismay was the managing director of Harland and Wolff, her builders, Thomas Andrews, who'd had quite a hand in designing her. Also on board, in a more humble role, Frank Prentice, who worked in the purser's department.
When we pulled away from Southampton Dock, there was the New York moored in front of us. And as we pulled away, she nearly bumped us with her stern, but the tugs came along and pushed her back. We left Southampton Water and went to Cherbourg, picked up passengers there and mail. And from there we went to Queenstown and picked up mail, specie, mail and passengers. And then we went flat out for New York. Speed about 22, 23, 24 knots.
There was an air of expectancy on board, as Frank Prentice could sense. After all, Titanic was nearly twice the size of her competitors.
It's a beautiful ship. And we had the cream of the White Star officials on board. We had Bruce Ismay aboard, we had the designer aboard, and we had 12 millionaires aboard and their wives. And, well, everybody was set to enjoy themselves. And after the third day, we had messages coming in about ice and icebergs, but we didn't seem to take much notice of that. We went flat out. And of course, on the night of the 14th, she hit a berg. And really, we should have been 300 miles away from where we were.
The unthinkable had happened. The greatest drama in maritime history was beginning to unfold. Edith Heisman was a 15-year-old girl travelling to New York with her parents.
We had music that night. A band was playing. We went to bed about, say, 10:30. And all of a sudden, the ship sort of went into the iceberg. She sort of first gone off, because she was going full speed. And she was thrown back. And the second time, she did the same thing. And the third time, she stopped dead.
I was in my cabin then. We had a cabin for 6. And we were discussing what we'd do when we arrived back in Southampton. And all of a sudden, she came to a halt. There was no impact as such. It was just like jamming your brakes on a car. And that was that. She stopped. We had a porthole open, and I looked out, and the sky was clear, the stars were shining, the sea was dead calm. Of course, what had happened, we'd slipped over the iceberg. And although she was supposed to be unsinkable with a double bottom, the iceberg had cut her from forward on the starboard side to the engine room, almost amidships, right through her 2 bottoms.
On the bridge, the captain, Edward Smith, began to realise that the situation was getting out of hand as water gushed into the doomed ship.
Andrews and Bruce Ismay and the captain were together discussing this, and Bruce said to Andrews, how are things down below? And Andrews said, she's going to sink, sir.
So my father said, you go up on deck and see what's wrong. So he went up on deck and he came back. He says, you better get dressed and come up on deck. He says, they've only struck an iceberg.
Then things did begin to happen because the water was rushing in and we had orders to get the lifeboats out. And of course the same old order, women and children. The first boats away didn't have many passengers on board because they were afraid to go down. There was a 70-foot drop to the water and they didn't think she was going to sink. And a few of the first boats on the port side got away with half filled. And we had 16 lifeboats and they each carried 50. And if they'd been filled, we could have saved 800.
While we were waiting for the lifeboat, my dad was standing there smoking a cigar, and he says, I'll see you in New York, But my father went down with the Titanic and my mother and I were rescued.
Then I had orders to go down the storeroom with a gang of men and get all the biscuits we could find and bring them up to the boats and distribute around the boats. Well, when we got back up onto the boat deck, we couldn't get near the lifeboats. There were 3 boats up there that were full of passengers and mixture of crew, I suppose. And we couldn't get them down because she had sort of list to port. You can imagine halfway down she would have hit the ship's side. Before I got my lifebelt on, I met a young couple. They spent their honeymoon in France and we'd picked them up at Cherbourg. And she was having trouble with her lifebelt. So I fixed that on to her. And I said, I think you'd better get into a lifeboat. She said, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to leave my husband. So I said, well, it's just precautionary measure. You get in, your husband will follow later on. And I got her away, and that was that. And then I picked up my own lifebelt and put it on. I thought, well, I'd done all I possibly could. I'd helped them all I could. And I thought, well, now I'll go up and get out of all this scrumming and go on the poop deck. And there were about 4 of us up there. And whilst I was up there, we sent up these lights, rockets, which burst up very high in the sky, and then you could see our boats spread out all over the place. And I had that in mind somehow. And Rix went, and Kieran went. And I was there by myself then, thinking. And all of a sudden she lifted up and you'd hear everything crashing through her. Everything that was movable was going through her. And then she went down and seemed to come up again. So I thought, well, now I'm going to leave. And I was hanging on to a board. We had 2 boards, starboard and port, which said, keep clear of propeller blades. And I was hanging on to one of these and I was getting higher and higher in the air. And I thought, well, now I'll go, and I dropped in, and I hit the water with a terrific crack. And luckily, I didn't hit anything when I dropped in. And then I looked up at the Titanic. So the propellers were right out of water, the rudder was right out, and I could see the bottom. And then gradually she glided away, and that was that. That was the last of the Titanic.
We were 9 hours in the lifeboat. We had no water, nothing to eat, And we just sat there. Of course, we had to get right away because of the suction, you see. And her lights sort of didn't go all out, disappeared all the time in the water until she got to the top, to the boilers, and she sort of exploded. I turned my head away. I wouldn't look to see her go down. And you could hear the screams of the people on the ship, It was really terrible.
But rescue was at hand for some of the passengers. The Cunarda Carpathia was on the scene, her captain having run at speeds he never thought possible to get to Titanic. For Frank Prentice help too was also at hand.
By the grace of God, I came across a lifeboat and they pulled me in. I sat on a seat and I sat next to Mrs. Clark, the girl I'd put into a lifeboat. And she said, the first thing she said, "Have you seen my husband?" So I said, "No, I haven't, but I expect he'll be all right."
Although the Titanic's lifeboats had spaces for 1,178 people, only 706 were picked up by Carpathia, including the White Star chairman, Bruce Ismay. In Southampton, the loss of the Titanic was nothing short of a catastrophe, but the news was slow in coming in, and to start with, inaccurate. Helen Podesta was married to a fireman on Titanic, Jack Podesta, and Violet Lewis's husband, Arthur, was a steward on board. Both were saved, but not before a great deal of heartbreak was caused to both wives.
We was all sat having our breakfast, and the news came through that the Titanic had sunk. And we all went down to the dock gate, and they had all the names posted up.
I got up the next morning to answer the door to the insurance man, and he said to me, "What an awful thing have happened." I said, "What's that?" So he said, "The Titanic's gone down with all hands." I said, "Don't say that." I said, "That my hubby's aboard." And he said, "Oh," he said, "I wouldn't have told you that for all the world."
Violet Lewis's brother immediately went to find out what the situation really was.
And he came back and he said, "Oh," he said, "it's all right, Vi." He said, "They're sailing to Halifax, under their own steam." And then later on in the day, the paper came out to say the ship had gone down with 1,500 lives lost.
All Northam, where I live, was plunged in mourning. Nearly every house in Northam had lost a son or husband. It's true. And every blind was drawn in Northam.
I couldn't sleep or rest, of course. And then the next morning I got up and I went to the docks, and was written upon the board all the hands that were saved. And I looked down and his name wasn't there. And it went on all the week like that till the Friday. I never knew till the Friday that he was saved. And then I had a telegram from the office to tell me he was saved. My brother came up from the docks to tell me everything was all right.
The tragedy did, however, have some positive results. Never again would a liner sail with too few lifeboats for the number of passengers on board. Watertight integrity of future liners was improved, and an iceberg patrol was immediately started so that adequate warning was always available for other transatlantic liners.